Hi, and welcome back to the Comics Lair. I'm going to be your host tonight, Jim Nettles, and tonight we're going to be pulling up and going to dinner with the Endless Ones. We're here to pull up and talk all about Neil Gaiman's take on the Sandman. But before we get started, let's go around and see who all has decided to join the party tonight. So, Patrick, you are up first.
I am Patrick Dugan. I am the author of the Darkest Storm trilogy, The Watchers of Asteria, and the Pixie Punk Adventures, which will be out in February.
Kelley?
My name is Kelley Frank. I am a horror artist and illustrator and also a author.
Marx?
Yeah, Marx Pyle. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, writer, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Marisa?
Hi, I think I didn't say hi. Hi, or I am Marisa Wolf. I speak English real good, which is great because I am a science fiction and science fiction and fantasy author. I've had 0 alcoholic beverages today, so this is just gonna be great.
Are you going for a dry January? Is that the problem?
I'm not. Maybe I should be drinking is the secret. I don't know. Words are hard, you guys.
Well, as always, we of course want to thank our sponsors for this show, which of course is Heroes and Heroes Online and Heroes Convention as well, which you can find at heroesonline.com. And so at Heroes, of course, you can find all of the Sandman series. But let's talk a little bit about where you guys first got to meet Morpheus in his various incarnations. So, Patrick?
I read them actually when they were in Vertigo Comics. I happened to stumble upon them at Heroes. Ain't hard to find when I was down here in Charlotte. So yeah, I dug them. They were just amazing. And over the years, I've collected multiple versions of Sandman, including a lot of artwork. So that's where I started.
Kelley?
I was a teenager and super into the goth scene and going into a lot of comic book shops downtown Atlanta and going into those little club areas. And this was after the books had been out for a bit and they were collected into graphic novels. And I saw one of the covers by Dave McKean, those weird, like surreal covers. And I was like, I need that. That looks amazing. What is this? And it's been an obsession ever since.
Marx?
Yeah, similar like Patrick. I read it originally. I didn't really read it until maybe my 20s or so. So I started to get more of wanting to read more comic books that weren't just superheroes or straight up superheroes. And of course, I'd always heard about Sandman, so a lot of the Vertigo titles. And so I checked them out and loved it ever since.
Marisa?
So I was reading comics, and the owner of the comic book store was always asking, what else I was reading. And I had just read this book that I loved where everyone's like sitting around in a tavern telling different stories. And he was like, oh, you know what? I think it's time for this. And he slides World's End over to me, which is like at the end of Sandman, but you can start there. So it was near the end of the run. Like Kelley said, they were all collected in graphic novels, so I didn't have to like wait month to month. I read it in probably 30 minutes, and then I read it again endlessly, pun intended, for like a week. And then I went back and I bought everyone, and I did not have money. Like that was a huge issue. I was a teenager. It was the early-ish mid-90s. I basically built my entire personality around loving Sandman for a good 2 to 3 years. Like all of my AOL instant message away messages were Sandman quotes. I wore an ankh for several years without taking it off. I at one point perfected Death's little curly Q. I can no longer do it. Yeah, it's wonderful. Obsessed. I mean, in that way that teenage girls fall hard and fast and forever. That was Sandman for me.
Yeah, we had the same backstory.
Our origin story is very similar.
Yay!
Well, and actually, one of the things I think is interesting is because you ladies fell hard and fast. It was for many women as a demographic in comics. It was very much targeted for, and that's what sucked a lot of you poor ladies into the world of geekdom.
Nice.
So Obviously, we're going to be getting into spoilery territory. So if you haven't seen it, read it, watched it by now, that's on you. So go forth from here with words of warning. So let's actually dive a little bit deeper into the world. Let's actually start about how both the comic series starts as well as the TV show. We see Morpheus being pulled in, made a prisoner in a very, 20s, 30s looking type house, and seeing him pulled in and made a prisoner. And when you physically see Morpheus for the first time, he's very waif-like. He looks fragile. He looks innocent. He looks like he can be easily damaged. Like a thought can make him go away, much like a dream. The first time you saw it, whether it was in print, whether it was on film in any of the various incarnations, what was your first thought about Morpheus, about Dream? So Kelley, I'm going to throw that at you.
I mean, I had just gone through a phase with The Crow. So I was like, oh, hey, this is my aesthetic. Look at this dude. Because, Brandon Lee's character in The Crow ends up, he has a long scene where he climbs his way out of the grave and goes back to his house, and he's trying to find clothes along the way, and he's very fragile. And then later you see him just like taking bullets and killing people all over the place. So, I mean, I was just like, yeah, let's see where this goes. I'm, what is this? I was very into that, but I've been reading comics for a little while too. So I was like, some people were turned off by the art, I remember. And I was reading stuff with Kelly Jones art. So it wasn't bothering me at all. I was like here for it.
Marx, how about you? What do you think in terms of kind of that opening? What the first time you get to see him, that idea of, is he a hero? Is he not? And being captured. How was it for you?
Yeah, it's very memorable and mysterious, because you don't know where the story is going to go. It's a little different kind of start to a story, also for a TV series too. And because he's kind of passive in some ways at first, and as a protagonist in their story. But the visuals in the graphic novel were great and capture your imagination. And I think the cinematography did a great job and set dressing, everything to recapture that. And that actor does a great job capturing this sort of kind of mystical otherworldliness kind of thing that he does. So so I like that. I never made a connection about Crow because I love Crow. Like I was addicted to Crow for like 2 years. I rewatched that movie over and over again and listened to the album over and over again and stuff. So but yeah, I see a little bit of a visual connection between those two too. But, yep. It was a very memorable start.
Marisa?
Yeah. So, I mean, I started with The Wake for Dream's death. That was what I read first. So fun times. So going then back to the beginning, I think because Neil, I always say Gaiman, I don't know. I only read you, Neil. Sorry, I don't hear you. So he said he had some plan all along of what was going to happen. And so it's interesting that I kind of started with the end because then I read through. And so he does start vulnerable and he does start broken, but I was like, oh, this is why he dies. So like that whole time I had this thing of like, he has been taken out of his power and something is going to happen along the way. Like clearly lots of books worth of things. But I was always stuck on that vulnerability of him because I started with, he's dead now. So now I'm going to see what happened to get there. So thankful to the comic book owner for starting me on this path. I'm not sure why he started me with that one, but it was, I don't know. And then when the show started, I had been so excited and so nervous about that show for a long time. And from that first scene, I was like, I think this is it. Like this feels like that comic. It feels like oh my gosh, the casting, the lighting, the music. Like I got chills in that first scene.
Patrick, how about you?
I thought the setup was amazing because you start off thinking they're pulling in death, and then you get Dream instead. And it's like, and then the sleeping sickness that comes from that. I just thought it was amazing. It's kind of like the Pandora's box effect. Nobody, when they created email, was expecting spam and phishing attempts and all this stuff. And it's the same thing. They captured Dream, and now nobody can sleep. And so I thought that was brilliant. I mean, Gaiman is a master for a reason. And every part of that was just the opening was just fantastic. It catches you right at the beginning and you're like, what is going on? They're summoning death. We're getting rid of death. And then you get Dream and you're like, no, there's something wrong. So I mean, once you get in a couple pages in, you can't put it down. It's impossible.
So looking at and diving a little bit deeper into the rest of the world before we kind of start to break apart that story a little bit more, for those that are a fan of it and know the world, you start getting into the fact that, you start out by knowing that there's death and there's dream, which tells you there's got to be more out there. There's got to be this giant dysfunctional family, but you don't necessarily know who all of those players are. And seeing that the Sandman from Neil's standpoint in being offered to create a new take, the original Sandman came from an earlier 70s comic, got a short run, and they said, hey, look, just go do a reboot, do your own thing. So we see a creator early in his career being given this nice big package and turned loose to go build a world. And what does he create? He creates the endless. He creates this family, each of whom has very specific function, very specific purpose. And it's very much an interesting take on that idea of the gods, the divinity. Everyone has purpose, everyone has form and function. And you see how that form and function creates conflict. Now, if we take away the idea of Dream and Morpheus, you can't pick him. Who is your favorite of the others? And what is it you love to see about them within the endless? So, Marx, I'm going to throw it to you.
Me? Okay. Everybody else's, well, not everybody else, but a lot of people's favorite is Death, and that's my favorite too. So, I think they cast that character really well. That what we saw of Death in the TV series, that scene played out really well. The whole episode did, and I'm curious to see more about that. There's so much you can do with that concept of death, but yeah, I love the idea of the endless. I love the idea of creating your own. Yeah, it adds this element of mythology and mystery. At first, you don't know who they all are, and you always want to know what's the next one, what they're going to look like. So,
Marisa?
I mean, it's Death. It's obviously Death. I love her. I also got to like Discworld and Terry Pratchett around the same time as Sandman, so I always wanted Terry Pratchett's Death to hang out with Neil Gaiman's Death. But if I had to pick it back up, which I happily will, the casting for Desire for the show, I was like, I hated Desire in the comics. I hated them. I love them now. So like in the show, that a delight, to use a pun again, not on purpose, but I'll take it. Total delight. Yeah.
Patrick?
In the show, it's definitely Death. I'm sorry. It's,
Don't be sorry.
How can you not? I mean, she's a goth girl going around taking souls. I mean, you can only, I thought, in the comic books, I really liked Delirium, but Death has always been my favorite. So,
Kelley?
I also love Death, but I will say that my one that's right up there is Despair. I was going through some major depression issues as a teen and didn't have like a diagnosis for it, and I really like related to that character. It was just the fact that she has the little hooked ring and stuff, and she'll literally sit on people's backs. I'm a little iffy about how they portrayed her in the series. I kind of want to have more of that kind of surreal, like despair sitting on people's shoulders, literally weighing them down. But we didn't get a chance to see that yet. So hopefully we see more of that. But yeah, her and Death were both really influential for me. I in terms of my art style and in terms of just my way of just thinking about these heavy concepts. There's something about personifying them that makes it easier to sort of conceptualize and confront, I think.
And so as we kind of think about, you have all of these gods, all of these deities, all these beings of purpose. And that to me was one of the things that I thought was most interesting. Was it wasn't that they were just there to create, mirth and mayhem, but it truly was looking at and understanding the purpose and function and them embodying that. And it wasn't just, I'm the devil, so I get to go treat humans as playthings. It was, I'm here to create a testing for them. I'm here as death, not as an evil. I'm here as death to guide them to that next step. It was that look of how they interplayed with each other. Well, the next part of that becomes the realms we got to see and visit. So the first time you got to walk into the dream, the first time you got to see the dream broken, because after Morpheus is freed, spoiler alert, Morpheus gets loose and walks back into his realm after 70 years. Not only has there been devastation on Earth because you've got all these people that can't wake up and won't wake up, they're trapped in the dream. You also walk into the dream world and you see that it's basically abandoned. It's a wreck. So Marisa, the first time you saw that, the realm of dream, the land of dream, that realm, just a devastation. What were your thoughts about that and that look and that feel?
What a good question. I will say in the show, I remember it a lot more sharply in the show because it was so visual and so beautiful. I remember being obsessed with the library of unfinished books, like every book that ever was started but not finished, or was dreamt of but not done in the real world exists in Dream. And that for some reason made Dream as a realm make sense to me so much, of just like, oh, anything that's possible, anything that could have been is here and it's real. I think you follow Matthew into Dream the first time, right? The crow. And I was in the comic and I was so just like, who is Matthew? What is happening? What is going on? I do not understand. So I think it's that sense of wonder. And then later it's that sense of like Fiddler's Green making me sob really, really hard. Pretty sure I sobbed really, really hard. So in the show, amazing. And there's a thing I want to talk about, but I'll stop there. Yeah.
Okay. So Patrick, how about you?
I'm going to just reference the show just because it's, more current. But I think you just walk in and you're like, you can see the majesty, but it's broken. So you're like, wow, it's so amazing, but yet it's not even at its full potential. So I think it really, and it actually, I love the idea of that it's a broken dream. That when when you finally have to face up to the fact that one of your dreams is just never going to happen, it really played well with that kind of environment. You're looking at it going, yeah, this is a broken dream. This is the devastation that people feel when their dreams don't come true. And so I thought it was really just well played out. And really the visuals were amazing.
Kelley, how about you?
I love that concept of the broken dream. That devastation is right there. That is a really good way of putting it that I've never thought about. So I love that. For me, it was kind of like, there was that wonder of like when you first like see Narnia through the wardrobe, that same kind of feel of like, wow, there's this other world that's just beyond here. But I think also I really liked the idea of a space that reflects the mental state of the individual who controls it. And as an artist, that makes a whole lot of sense to me because my art becomes a reflection of my own mental states, depending on where I am and what, how I'm doing. So I can look back at art that I've done before and be like, wow, I was going through some things. Or be like, wow, that's clearly this, I didn't realize it at the time, but it's reflecting this situation that I was dealing with. And I think like stories and such, like we pull from our own experiences, and that idea of the whatever we're dealing with at the moment in our mental state kind of reflects our environment that we create in the world is very interesting to me. So yeah, I find it, I always think it's really interesting, just the dreaming itself.
Marx?
And they did a great job in the show, really showing this, otherworldness, dreams aspect is all sense of wonder. But then by it being broken, you wonder what it looked like before, and it creates a sense of history, and it makes it feel organic and alive. So, so that's just very captivating. Just that opening and or whenever you first see that the dream world, and they did. It's not an easy thing to capture. They did it really well in the graphic novel, and somehow they managed to capture it on television quite well. So I'm sure it wasn't cheap, but it was worth every dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've kind of got the setup, these are the characters we're dealing with. These are the people who have been around for billions of years and created the world. Not only the world that we're in, but the worlds around us, the worlds that support everything. So we get to go and visit places like hell. We get to go and visit, all of these different lands and realms, and see the masters of their kingdom kind of standing there looking at him going, oh, you let your toys break. Why is this my problem? The whole setup is that not only was he captured, but the three elements that made him up, the three elements that made him the king of his realm, fundamentally the crown, the scepter, and the jewel. He's lost the bag of sand. He's lost, in essence, the material manifestations of his power. And so when we start and get towards the end of the first episode and really the first part of the book, we start on this setup of a mortal has trapped him, and it's kind of like, wait a minute, I don't know what to do with you, but I know I can't turn you loose because that's not going to work out well for me. I also have not gotten what I wanted. Well, as we go along, we get the setup of the Corinthian. We get the Sandman's own creation. We get a nightmare who's come and who's gone manifest because he wants the same thing as the old man. He's like, look, I don't want to die. I want to continue with my mission, my purpose. And so we see, much like, when you wind up going to hell, you've got the minions of hell down there to serve. Well, you wind up having this idea of dream, having a balance, having those things that are the pleasant dreams, the joyful dreams, meetings and connections with those. And it's also the horrors and the nightmares and the terrors of the night. Well, it's one of those that gets loose and is our first real antagonist of the Corinthian. So what did you think of the idea of the Corinthian? What did what was kind of the scene that sets them for you? What was your kind of feeling of him as that antagonist against against Dream, against Morpheus? So Patrick, I'll start with you on that one.
I love the Corinthian, and I can't think of the name off the top. The convention they all went to, which for all the writers are all like, because we're always doing conventions, and I was just like, in the name, I can't come up with it off the top of my head.
It was I forget what it was, like a cereal
convention. Thank you. I'm like, I know it's something. So, but I think the Corinthian was such a great character. But I really think the juxtaposition where Dream at the end takes one of the nightmares who wants to change and actually turns her into a dream from the night. I'm getting shivers. Like that juxtaposition of the Corinthian just wants to be a native and he just wants to, feel what the humans feel, versus this nightmare who hates what she is and all she wants is to be a dream. And you see how hard-ass Morpheus is with her, and then he comes to realize after he deals with Corinthian, like, no, she actually has changed. She needs to be released into being what she really is. And I thought that was just phenomenal. that whole thing of, he's, Corinthian deep dives into the evil, and she's trying to get away from it because she doesn't want to do it. And I just thought that was brilliant.
Kelley?
I love Corinthian. he's so creepy. I loved him in the comics, and then in the series they just really made him even better. I can't remember the name of the actor they chose for him, but he's just amazing. They just did such a good job with him. I love the juxtaposition between him and Dream, because if you're just looking at them with Corinthian with his sunglasses on, you would think that their roles were the opposite. Because we've kind of been conditioned to think that the charismatic, blonde, tall, person is going to be the good guy, and the person who's like all pale and, black hair and looking all creepy and mopey, that's the bad guy. And so like, it really turns that around. But I also really like the idea of like serial killing itself is kind of the result of like Dream being captured and not trusting other people enough to put fail safes in place for if he's not in control of his kingdom. He's kind of a micromanager. He would be a total terrible manager to have, and for any kind of a business or whatever at first. And you really see Lucian struggle with that. And I don't blame Corinthian for not wanting to deal with him. And you start to see that Morpheus is the one that's kind of pushed things into this situation by not being a very good leader and mostly being caught up in himself. And he has to make amends for that. And I think that's why he doesn't completely he destroys Corinthian, but he keeps the skull that he based him on, because he recognizes that this is partially his fault as well, because he's the person in charge. And when you're in charge, you take responsibility when bad things happen. So it's the mature thing to do. So I don't know. I really enjoyed that whole play. It's always entertaining, and they did it really well in the TV series.
Marx?
Yeah, Corinthian's such a great villain. The actor did a great job with his charismatic performance. Made him very memorable, and I love how in the show, like, Corinthian's not in the graphic novel early on in there. They kind of like mention him a little bit, but he doesn't really pop up until much later. So I think it was great to intertwine him more into the main storyline for this season. I thought that was a very good choice. And I just thought that character and the visual appearance of his eyes and stuff is so iconic and memorable. And the whole cereal convention thing was hilarious. I love how the kids like, where's all the cereal at? So yeah, that was one of the highlights of the show for me that season.
Leave it up to the kids to get in trouble.
Can't stay with them.
Marisa?
So the part that Patrick brought up is the part that I wanted to talk about before when we talked about going to dream. That idea of the dream becoming the nightmare, or the nightmare becoming the dream. And that wasn't in the comics, and it was beautiful. Like it was definitely one of those things. I feel like, you write something a couple years go by and you're like, oh, I could have done that better. I feel like this was Neil Gaiman going, it would be cool. Or maybe it's the show writers, I don't know. But that so encapsulated the power of the dreaming to me, because in the comic it's Fiddler's Green's trying to become human, and Dream is not cool with that. And so to get to play a little bit of that story out with the nightmare becoming the dream and him being like, absolutely the F not, like, bye, you have to go. And then, okay, you know what? I was horribly, horribly wrong. That was so beautiful. And I juxtaposed with Corinthian, who, yes, I also very much enjoyed. He's so creepy. He gave me nightmares back in the day, which I'm sure is apropos. But I thought that whole storyline was great. I also thought, like, yeah, he's an antagonist. I mean, sure, he inspired hundreds and hundreds of serial killers, but I don't actually think he's the villain. Like, I think he had a code. He stuck to it. He's an antagonist. He didn't kill the kid. He helped save the kid. He killed people who needed killing. So it goes in comics. And And I mean, I thought I loved how they tied him into the Vortex story. I thought that was really, really smart, and made him feel much more antagonist than villain to me.
And nobody mentioned the scene that I really wondered how they were going to try to pull it off and how deep they were going to go, which was the diner scene.
Yeah.
Because to me, I had that whole idea the entire time is getting ready to watch it was the question of how graphic are they going to get?
Yeah.
But I thought that part of what was really fascinating to me was it was showing that dichotomy of no matter how normal things look, there's always something going on underneath. Everyone's got stuff going on. And the absence of dream, I think, led to a lot of the misfunction and dysfunction, everything going on with everybody in the scene and everybody we saw. And that idea almost became, how do we take all the different tropes of the people that are here and how do we flip them on their head and take it to the ultimate conclusion? And so I'll throw this out there as a freebie. Does anybody have any thoughts on the great diner scene? Or the full episode, I guess.
I have so many thoughts, but I'll let somebody else go first.
Yeah, when I reread the arc that the season 1 was based on, 'cause I hadn't read it for so long, I was like, wow, how are they going to do that? And that whole issue. It's so dark because it's the most horrific, I think, of the whole series.
Yeah.
But they did a good job overall.
Yeah, definitely tapped into, I don't know that I agree with the whole thing of that it's, straight up truth does that to people. Ripping away all the filters would definitely make it uncomfortable for everybody. But I don't know that it, and it also was the people who were in the diner at the time. So I went back and forth on what I thought about it. I thought it was really well done. I thought it got a little graphic at times. But, art director, what are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Ruby was it's a cool storyline. I, again, like how they tied it in. I did not love the diner scene in the comics, and I did not love the diner scene in the show. Not because it wasn't well done. It was, but I agree. I don't think it's only truth that's going to do that. But maybe truth and the lack of hope from not having dreams, or truth and the sense that your dreams are completely impossible and you could never possibly get to those things. But I felt like that there could be more nuance there for why we're going to jump straight to murder. I think comics, it was food, sex, murder pretty quickly. It's 24 hours. It's now it's an orgy. Now we're all dead. Okay, is that? And this was I was a teenager. I was like, is that how it goes? What's going on there? So didn't love it either time. But I think the show was better than the comics.
So I love the concept of the diner scene. I think it was really fascinating, but I liked it better in the show than in the book, because I feel like the book just had so much extraneous, just things for the sake of shock value. And Neil Gaiman, I think he said that people were asking, they were thinking he couldn't really do horror, so he did a super horrific episode, or comic for this part, and then there was that threat that things would always get that violent again, so it sets up that threshold of tension. I missed the fact that David Thewlis's character escapes from Arkham Asylum. I missed that because I'm a big Arkham Asylum Batman fan, and I was that would help explain for people a lot more why he is so messed up. He's literally in Arkham Asylum. I think he's imprisoned next to the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's that kind of thing. But David Thewlis did such an amazing job. I saw so many memes after this of it's him eating ice cream in front of chaotic scenes. It's just absolutely great. And I think that for anyone who's ever been feeling like outside of like mainstream culture, just looking in and just feeling like everything's chaos. It's really, there's a lot of really relatable like ideas about why people just seem irrational sometimes, and you have no idea why they behave in these certain ways. I think it does have that kind of resonance, but I agree. The book itself, it just kind of went a little too far. I don't mind violence in my comics at all. I like it actually, but I thought that it sort of had a little bit less of a point. It was kind of a flex more than it was a important plot point for the characters. So
yeah, it didn't advance the story.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some interesting parts, but I compare that to in like Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth, where the Joker threatens to put a pencil through some person's eye over the phone. And then when Batman shows up, he hasn't actually done that at all. But Batman thought for sure he was going to do it. Mm-hmm. So there's that idea of like the threatened horror more than the actual, I don't know. Yeah, but it's a good scene, but you know, I've seen a lot of debate about it online.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's why I had to bring it up, because it's one of the more controversial pieces out of the entire series, not only for the Netflix series, but out of the comic series, because there was one of those things that I won't say felt like it ran way off the rails, but it was almost the shock value level.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, it was one of those things of, if we're going to a world of extremes, let's look at the world of extremes.
Yeah. What would that be? Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it does set a threshold for violence that you could see later potentially, and does make you feel like, you know, your human characters are in like a lot of potential danger.
There's real. Yeah. This could go horribly wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually thought the scene with him in the car was much more
so tense.
On point.
Poor Rosemary. Poor Rosemary.
I mean, that there's no violence in it, but you're so like, oh my God, what's he gonna do to her? What's he gonna do to her? What's he gonna, I mean,
like white knuckling it. Yeah.
And you're like, and I think that was a much better scene than the diner scene, because I feel like that really, you know, you were invested in that scene. When you're in the diner, it's getting so out there. It's like people understand like being fearful of a stranger. Being in a diner where everybody's like humping and killing each other is, you know, not something that most people are, you know, are used to. So
it's only once a year or so.
I mean, yeah, it's a Christmas.
On the purge night, you know, we get it, but you know,
depends if it's Waffle House, maybe.
Yeah, well, Waffle House.
Not a sandwiches is there though.
Yes, that's right.
So if we now look at and compare that idea of that level of darkness, and we look at when Morpheus returns back to the realm of dream, he's looking at trying to start putting it back together. He's looking at this shattered world and looking to see who's left. And two of the major players that are left are Cain and Abel. And you see this tortured relationship between the two of them. And so what are your thoughts on the interplay of Cain and Abel and how all of that stuff goes down, both between them and watching how Dream shifts how he reacts to the two of them as the story goes along? Kelley, I'll throw you on the hook for that one.
I mean, Cain and Abel are pretty, or I think their dynamic is interesting, and it's one of those things where like it's dark humor. It's played for like dark comedy, where Abel is constantly being murdered, and it's like, oh, he'll be back later, I guess. I was a very like creepy child, so I found that kind of thing highly entertaining. But now looking back, I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty abusive relationship. I don't know. It's awkward. And I do think that Dream does come to trust them more, but yeah, it is very creepy. And it does have some, like, you know, highly dependent personality, you know, and sadistic personality sort of intertwining. And it just feels kind of, I don't know. I find it a little awkward looking back at it now, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Marx?
Yeah, it's definitely dark comedy. The one thing I didn't like about one of the changes I didn't like, I'm pretty sure it's a change, is where Morpheus kills their pet. I can't remember.
Gregory.
Yeah, Gregory. I didn't like that. I mean, I understand then he burns Goldie, I think is what it is, egg. So in that sense, it makes sense structurally, but I didn't like that. I didn't like that so early because you're trying to get to know Morpheus, and it makes him seem a little dark, maybe unlikable because of that. But otherwise, the Cain and Abel it's an odd take, but yeah, I don't know. It's a weird dynamic, really, honestly.
Yeah.
Reminds me a little bit of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, the newer one where that one ant kills the other ant.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah,
Marisa.
So I think the Gregory murder or dissolving happened in the comics because I feel like I remember crying real hard over Gregory more than once. That didn't make sense to me, honestly, because there was so much left in the dreaming. I was like, but why, like, the sweetest little gargoyle in all of creation? Like, how dare you? So I don't love it. But Cain and Abel were so weird, and I always struggled to figure out why they were in the dreaming. Like, I felt like they could have been in Despair's realm or somebody else's. But it was because they had done the House of Mysteries. Like there was a line of comics with them, which I had never read. And so it eventually felt to me like one of those, like, there's always another secret things. Like there's always something else to learn about stories and dreams and the dreaming. And so I thought that was interesting. But I hated killing Gregory in the 90s, and I hated killing Gregory in 2022. So strong feelings about that. Poor Abel for sure, but Gregory.
Patrick?
I think I did not like it. Gregory was awesome. But I also think it went to the mindset of Morpheus at the time, that he is so desperate and he will do anything to get his realm back that he literally destroys the best thing in his creations. And then afterwards, I think it showed when he brings Goldie. I think that it is a very subtle tick to show that he's actually changing, because the Morpheus that you see at the beginning, has no remorse, no ethics at all. He will do whatever it takes. It's his way. He is the master of the dream. He will do whatever he wants and hurt whoever he has to, that's in his way. And I think when he starts to realize that things have changed because he was gone for so long, that he starts to realize that these, creations of his have taken on a more full life than they ever had under him. And he starts to realize that the rules have changed. And so I think it was a masterful stroke to do that, because it really drives home what an SOB Morpheus is at the beginning of the episode.
That's a good point.
Or in the comics. And I think that alone, writing dystopians probably has skewed me a little bit, but I think that was a great way to show just how much of a bastard Morpheus is.
Well, that kind of leads into why I wanted to ask the question. Because one of the things a lot of the time we see when we're looking at characters that are presented as gods, as divine, as having this, seeing this great purpose, especially when we look at Morpheus compared to all of the other endless. Morpheus represents dreams. He represents both the best and the worst, the greatest of hope and the greatest of fears. And what we see in the realm of what's left seems to be the combination of both. Is the greatest of nightmares have all fled. And those parts that represent hope or just hopelessness without him are the things that are left, and the other parts that have gone, and as he says, have strayed or abandoned him. What we see is they've taken on and tried to develop themselves to a next stage, their next stage of growth, because he's gone. He's not there. He's not imposing that will anymore. And we've seen, as we talked about, that iron fist that he's carried throughout millennia, and what he's created in Manifest. So what do you think about this idea? Because really, Dream is the only character we see that has really significant growth and change. And that's something very unusual when we look at that idea of a divinity growing as a part of their creations. So Marx, what's your thought about Dream's growth arc? What do you think about what we saw him, how he's changed, and how that change then was reflected both in the dream world and as his creations came back?
He did, change. I think that is the advantage of killing Gregory, is that's such a cold thing for him to do. And then I think that's a good reason why they probably made that change in a storyline with the nightmare, what's become a dream, because I think that's a great way to show him that he's becoming more flexible and seeing, these beings as more of beings rather than tools or toys. So I think those changes or those aspects in the show help show that a lot. And yeah, for me, in some ways, it's kind of weird in this first season and these first arcs, because it does feel like he does change, and they do make that emphasize more in the show, I think, than maybe the graphic novel did in those particular stories. But I found in the graphic novel, when I read it, it was interesting because like Rose and some of the other characters were really very active in having these changes happen to them. So I could, even if Sandman wasn't changing much, or Morpheus, then I could enjoy, their arcs too. So
Marisa?
So I always thought in the graphic novel, he changed a little bit and then was like, you know what? I am incapable of more, and everyone around me deserves more. And that's why we got Daniel. They're just spoilers. I started the series with spoilers, y'all. So I feel like in the graphic novel, he was basically like, change or die. I think I'm gonna just die. And so like what you see is him doing enough to set up his realm for success, for what is right, for what he sees that it needs, and it's not him. It doesn't feel like they're going in that direction in the show. Like in the show, it really does feel like he's changing. And I might be misremembering the arc in the graphic novel. But I really loved it in the show, because in the graphic novel, what you get for change is Destruction just giving up his realm entirely and saying, absolutely not, I'm not doing this. I'm gonna go be something else and do something else. You have Delight turning into Delirium. You have change in the Endless, but not for Dream, which is interesting because dreams are about change. So in the show, it's just so interesting to me to see those places where he could change and where he did. And it could be because the actor is so charming. Like, he's not charismatic like the Corinthian, but he is so charming. Let's go. Whatever you say. I like it. So anyway, I found that an interesting shift, because I felt the graphic novel is one way and the show is a different, but they still both very much feel like Sandman. So
Patrick?
Yeah, I thought Dream's change, I think because of it being a show, and they're not going to switch out, and unless you're The Witcher, you're not going to switch out your main character, so so you have to, I think they're having to incorporate more changes into Dream, because he is going to be the main character through the whole series. But I also think that, Dream was broken when he was imprisoned. And I almost think that it was Gaiman's way of saying that, like, he had kind of been, corrupted by the humans. Because when he went back to the dreaming, he tried to be what he used to be, and he couldn't. In the years that he was imprisoned, and he was helpless, I think made him look at the people around him, because I'm sure before he was imprisoned, they're probably like Legos to him. You know, you just put them, he puts them together and then he puts them on the shelf, and, they're his toys. So he doesn't care, and if they break, he just makes new ones. Whereas after he'd been imprisoned and he had lost everything, I think when he starts to see in other people the feelings that he had while he was imprisoned, that lends him an air of empathy. And I think that is really what changes Dream, because he doesn't because when he's interacting with the Endless and with Lucifer, you can tell he's not at the top of his game, because he's having second thoughts like, maybe this wasn't the way to do this, and so I think that was kind of a really subtle nod towards, Dream leaving the deity role to be more of a leader.
Kelley?
I agree with everybody, and I also want to add, like, Calliope, you really see the change in that episode. That little one at the end where you get the dream of a
Thousand cats.
Thousand cats. Yeah, can't remember if it's 1,000 or 1,000,000, but I love that episode so much. The animation's so good. But with Calliope, you really see that change, because he just refused to ever speak to her, to the point where it didn't occur to her to reach out to him until someone else, the fates have to tell her to reach out to him. That she could, but he's imprisoned, and so they both are going through this dual imprisonment. And you see that, like, the fact that Dream comes to help is a big difference from when we see him even earlier in the series walking through hell and passing one of his ex-lovers that he's consigned to hell. And Matthew's like, "Who's that?" He's like, "Oh yeah, it's my ex."
Ex-girlfriend.
He's like, wow, Matthew's realizing what he's in for as helping this person. And you do start to see, and spoilers, that will come back. but yeah, you really do start to see with the Calliope episode. I think that's my favorite one for showing the change that he has, because then you suddenly realize, oh, they had a kid. Ooh, there's tea here. And that's where you start to really understand, like, maybe that's why he is the way he is. One of those people who's like throwing himself into work so he doesn't have to, think about other things that have to do with him. And, once that starts unraveling, you start to see him having to confront more things. And yeah, it does lead up to the wake eventually, but yeah.
So let me throw this one out there, because there's so many other characters we see. We see some crossovers from other DC characters stepping in. We see the Fates. We see a lot of other characters here. Is there anybody we haven't talked about, or maybe have only just touched on, that you think really was kind of critical that you want to hit on as a character in terms of how they came into play? So Marisa, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
So I loved Matthew in the comics. He's your entry point. He's your, what the heck is going on here? Because he's figuring out what the heck is going on here. It took me a while to warm up to him in the show. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because Patton Oswalt's voice is so recognizable. And I was just like, oh God, Patton, why are you here? I don't know. I don't know what that was. So it took a couple episodes before I was like, oh, Matthew, I'm back in. Where, like, Dream having a Raven in the comics was very much like the Doctor should never travel alone in Doctor Who. Like, he should always have a companion. It was like that sort of thing. And it took me a while to get that feeling in the show, and I missed it. I missed it a lot. So.
Patrick?
I'm actually going to kind of pivot on this one.
Do what I want.
In the comic, Morpheus is walking through purgatory, and all the people who had committed suicide had been turned to trees. And when I read that, I was going through a really bad point in my life, and that like single-handedly, I think that thought always stuck with me. Like, if I ever did something to myself, I was going to be in purgatory as a tree. And I realize that kind of sounds silly in a way, but but it really like resonated with me so hard that when I was at my lowest point, that never crossed my mind, because I had that image in the back of my head of like, this is what happens to you if you commit suicide. And I really, really, really was hoping they would do that scene in the show. It's kind of like not having Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings. But I was so looking forward to it, and then they never did it, and I was like really disappointed. As far as the librarian is my favorite, bar none. She is just fantastic. I mean, the actress is amazing, but just she is just a badass, and she's like, well, you can unmake me, but I'm going to tell you the truth. And I just love that. I just love that character so much.
Agreed. That's great.
Yeah.
Kelley, how about you?
I loved Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer. I loved that. And I know that there was a lot of like fan division over, oh, you're casting a lady as Lucifer. And it's like, no, have you ever looked at Botticelli paintings?
Correct.
Why do angels need gender? But yeah, she was amazing. And it's interesting because, if anyone's seen the Lucifer series, like this is the same character that's just going in a different direction. And Lucifer has their own like comic book series that's like, I think it's still ongoing. Is it still? Yeah. And
that's recently, yeah.
The Corinthian has his own comic series that just came back. So like, there's just so much that I'm hoping that they continue going with that lore, because I could have watched Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer just all day. And I can't watch the other show now because it's like it feels kind of like standard by comparison. And I'm like, man, it's ruined the show for me now, because now I want Gwendolyn Christie's Lucifer, because that like, I don't know, she just has like a certain state, like stature, like her delivery is really good, and she has a lot of micro expressions that I just love. Also, I will not be happy until I see Delirium in live action. So those are my things. Also, Despair needed more screen time. But
agreed.
Yeah.
Marx?
The only one mentioned that hasn't already been mentioned is Joanna Constantine or Constantine.
Oh yeah,
I loved it.
Yeah, I thought she was a good replacement, at least for some of it, of John Constantine, Constantine, whatever you like to call it. Yeah. Tomato.
Yeah.
And I thought she did a great job, and I just was like, man, I'd like to see. I would see a spin-off series just with her. So.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, she was great, absolutely great.
Yeah, she delivered a great performance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's after saying how much I love John Constantine on Legends of Tomorrow and his own show. So
I would love let's do a multiverse where they are playing off each other. Why not?
Amazing.
Why not? Average viewer knows what multiverses are. We can roll into it now.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I think a crossover series in the multiverse would be a lot of fun. Can you imagine? Yeah. Well, before we get out of here, I'm going to throw one more question out there. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you think we absolutely have to mention? Because Marisa, I know you were busting earlier to say something.
Oh, it was the Nightmare into a Dream. That was very exciting. No, I could talk about Sandman all day, every day. Like the language, the visuals, the partnership, the way Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean talk about each other and their work together just like makes my heart so happy.
Yeah.
And Marissa's point on the gender of angels, I think Constantine, the movie with Keanu Reeves, where Tilda Swinton is the angel. I mean, she I had Gwendolyn Christie was the same way. It's just that power in that, you're just drawn to it. And it's like, there is no gender. It's just power. And so I thought that was a great point. I'm sorry, Kelley may have made.
Kelley, yeah.
Sorry, I'm old, forgetful.
You are fine.
It was a great point. I would happily take credit for it, but yeah, definitely Kelley.
We'll give credit where credit's due.
Yep.
But I thought as soon as you said that, my mind went right to Constantine with Tilda Swinton. I was like, oh, that is really bad. She's badass. And so I was like, yeah, that. And as soon as I saw Gwendolyn Christie, I thought the same thing. I'm like, they nailed that.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I love it. There's so many like good. I've seen people call it like one of the queerest shows on TV right now. And I'm like, that's awesome, but that's also sad. You know what I mean? Like clearly there's a need for more representation. And there were some people I saw some fans that were angry that some characters were being portrayed by Black actors or actresses. And I was just like, just get over yourselves. So, I mean, I think that as usual, like there's always like a subset of fandom that is trash and everyone else just has to, deal with that. But I think those people have been shot down. And if anyone hasn't looked at Neil Gaiman's responses to trolls, he was on Twitter. Now he's over on Tumblr. It is amazing. Him just addressing people and just destroying them for being like racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. It is chef's kiss lovely. Yeah. So
especially when he has receipts, it's my favorite because like he's so direct about it. But then when somebody's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you had a black dream for like 5 seconds," he's like, "Yeah, like who would have done that in 1993?" And he's got like the panel, like the whole point of the English is they look like whoever the person they're talking to thinks they look like. Yeah. So like, death goes through it, dream goes, whatever. It's the most bullshit complaint in history of time, and his ability to be like, "Oh, like this."
Yeah, it is. Neil Gaiman is just being a god among men over there, and it is amazing. So, like, if you've ever been like angry at fans for just being angry about stupid things, just go and just revel in Neil Gaiman just destroying people left and right. It is a beautiful thing to see.
No fear.
Yeah, if I never heard the words "it's canon" again, I'll be really happy. It's so stupid. Right? It's like it's fiction. It's not real. Yeah. It can be whoever you want.
Also, the creator is here telling you that this is it, so shut the fuck up. That's canon. Yeah. Jesus. Sorry, I didn't have a wheel, but sorry.
You're out of the 20 minutes.
I knew you're going to slip one in. As I'm trying not to sneeze here. So, Marx, any last thoughts as well?
No, I just want to see more. I'm looking forward to see what else they do. I love the bonus episode they had that they released. I would love to see more of that tacked on. And I think they add something really special to the overall series and the universe. So.
Yeah,
just one more and a spinoff.
Yeah.
Well, I love those little micro episodes like that because they're not tied in directly with the story. And if you have a friend that's like not sure if they want to watch it, you can show that to them and then they can decide if they want to watch it. And it's really smart. And I wish more shows would do things like that because it works like better than like a pilot, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, because somebody left me in charge, I'm going to throw a few last words in on this one is, to me, I think the beauty of the series was that it showed both sides. It showed humanity at its best, its worst, and it showed the divine thinking it's operating in purpose. And I think that, having seen all forms of humanity, all forms of people, and everybody just trying to go through and seeing how people deal with trials, tribulations, and struggles, and going back to the Constantine episode and seeing the addiction, seeing, some of these various struggles and everything else, and all of it fundamentally boiling back down to this idea that everyone had lost the ability to dream. Everybody had lost that sense of hope and wonder, and that sending the world spiraling off into hell for all practical purposes, I think was a beautiful part of the story. I'm ready for the next season, and I am really hoping we get to see some of those other spinoff stories and some of the other vignettes as well. And I'm actually hoping we get to see some of the crossovers that happened during the different runs, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. But before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys and all that stuff that you're putting out there. You know, of course, website, social media, and of course, whatever that latest release is you want to push. So, Patrick, you're up first.
I am at patrickdugan.net. That's where I post my newsletter, so you can see cute pictures of my dog and hear about my books. I'm on Facebook as Patrick Dugan Author. I'm on Twitter as P_Dugan. So you can, but the easiest place to find me is usually Facebook.
Kelley?
I've quit Twitter, but I'm everywhere else. You can find, my name is Kelley Frank, but I go by Morbid Smile Art. So if you just morbidsmile.com, all one word, you can find with the .com, obviously, you can find me. And if you just Google Morbid Smile Art, I'm the first result. So yeah, come check out all my stuff.
Marx?
Right now.
You find me at marxpyle.com. That's sort of my hub for everything, including podcast, genre entertainment, and also publishing. I publish anthologies with cool authors. Marisa is one of the authors, and the newest one, Tales of Monstrosity. It's also you can find it from there, but also at cabotcrossing.com.
And Marisa?
I just bookmarked Kelley's website. I feel great about it. I am marisawolf.net or .com. I go both ways, and you can find me most often on Instagram at bookdogs, where you get pictures of my books and mostly pictures of my dogs. And it's delightful. Also, if you go to my website, you can join my newsletter. You get a free short story, and then you get lots of gifts and shenanigans twice a month.
And I've had
to follow you on Instagram.
Oh, please do.
You can go follow everybody.
Yeah, right? Let's do this.
And I've had the pleasure of jumping in for Nancy Northcott tonight. I am Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, thespeculative-fiction-academy.com, at creatingprose.com, and your ConTinual. So thanks, everybody, and we will see you guys again soon.